Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Root Institute. My name is Vanessa DeLuca. I am the editor-in-chief of TheRoot.com, and it is my absolute joy and pleasure today to speak with two really incredible forces of nature in the tech world. These two young ladies are making blazing new trails, and I'm so excited to be talking to them today about the work that they're doing. So I'd love for each one of them to introduce themselves, and maybe we'll start with you, Angela.
Sure. I'm Angela Benton. I'm the founder and CEO of Streamlytics. And what we're doing at Streamlytics is we're empowering everyday people and fast growing communities to own and monetize their personal data. We unify that data and then provide ethical access to it to companies who want first party data to use for sales, marketing, and artificial intelligence, and the like.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Holly.
Hi, everybody. My name's Natalie Conde. I am the CEO and founder of AI for the People, which is a communications firm. So we work with film, television, journalists, and other interested parties who are trying to make sense of what it means to be in an increasingly technical world with a focus on how technology impacts Black communities, how what we can do about it, and an invitation to build the future that we want. And then very recently, very recently, I've become a co-founder of an AI company called Farmer that's bringing precision agriculture to the Southeast and across the Caribbean.
Wow, that's amazing. So let's start at the beginning because I really want to know how each one of you got into the tech world. Like, what sparked your interest in going into the tech space? Because so often we we follow examples that we see put in front of us, but we're so underrepresented. There may not be that many examples. So I'm just love to hear from both of you how you became attracted to the industry. And let's start with you, Angela.
I got interested in technology. I was actually working, and I had a love for magazines. But this was during the first .com boom. And so everyone was like, this thing called the internet is going to put us out of business. None of us are going to have jobs. So I ended up teaching myself how to code, and kind of fell in love with web design, and development, and started a career in technology. And so this was, literally back in the day when there was a job title called webmaster. And I remember one of the jobs that I had, the server was in a closet in the back. And this was, I was working at UPS Logistics Technologies, which basically was the GPS routing software for all of the UPS trucks. And so I've been in the industry, for quite some time. But, to your point, Vanessa, there weren't really any examples. And so I wasn't really looking at someone saying, oh, I want to be like her or him. I just thought it was really cool and really interesting. And I also thought it was the future, and really just fell in love with it.
Sure. So Mutale, do you have a similar story?
I actually have almost the same story. I'm guessing Angela and I must be around the same age. So I came in from journalism, and when in 2008, when Obama ran, there was this new digital strategist job title that came up in politics. And I was working on some campaign, and they were like, can you do our Twitter? I didn't know what Twitter was. I had never heard of it. I was looking at all of these white people who were doing these strategy digital jobs who couldn't do it either. And I said yes. And from then I kept falling forward into these tech roles because literally I must have gotten to the platform as it launched out of beta. And then I get a call. So 2008, I get a call maybe 18 months later because hackathons were coming to New York City, where I'm based. start to go to hackathons. And then about 3 or 4 months after that, somebody told me about a company called Google. There was a job, they needed somebody to communicate about the internet. And that's when I realized not everybody in tech codes. 50% of jobs in all tech companies are on the business end, and I've never looked back.
I think that's fantastic. It's so amazing to me that without many guidelines, you two were able to kind of find your way. And so I just wanted to know what fascinates you the most about the tech world. What attracts you to it?
For me, I think what attracts me to it is that I really do believe it is a future framework for society, and will power a lot of, and we're seeing actually this already, but power a lot of our day-to-day interactions, transactions, just everything that we typically don't associate technology with. Um, in the next 10, not even 10, 5, 10, 20 years, we're going to be living in a completely different new society. And it's exciting, but it's also scary at the same time, especially if, you understand and realize that there are certain communities that might not realize this, and might not really understand the shift that's taking place right now.
My answer would be similar. Kind of 10 years plus on, my expertise are in artificial intelligence and building machine learning type systems. And those give you the ability to answer big questions. So whether I'm thinking about pharma, where we're really looking at global warming and how do we reduce nitrogen oxide emissions and other carbon emissions that are warming our globe, or even if we're looking at AI for the people, and how do we let ordinary folks know that machine learning is not something that is difficult or hard concepts. The AI, to Angela's point, are driving every interaction, whether you're using self-checkout at Target, whether you are moving through public space, whether you see speed cameras, whether your car is driving itself. These are all functions of this technology that many people not only don't understand, but are also not realizing economic value from. So a future economy is going to be predicated on being able to play in this environment. And I just think that that's critical.
Well, that really leads really well into my next question, which is about how underrepresented we are in this space. And wanted to talk to you, hear from both of you about why you think that is, and what can be done to encourage more people to move into these spaces that obviously are the future for so many of us.
I think I have a unique perspective, just because I've been in the industry for so long, and I've been able to see, over the past almost 20 years, um, the lack of diversity in technology to where we are now. And it's drastically different. So, from my perspective, I do see more participation, even though the numbers are clear, like the reports are clear. We still are very much underrepresented. But I think a lot of times when people talk about this idea of us being underrepresented, we tend to ignore kind of how far we've come already. And so I just want to acknowledge, we are still underrepresented, but it's drastically different in the technology space than what it was, 10 years, 20 years ago, and even 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when folks like, Ken Coleman, was at HP, and like there's a handful of Black people in technology. They all knew each other, like literally a handful. And so now, I think we're in a really awesome position where people, they're not just interested in becoming tech entrepreneurs, right? There's so many other ways that you can participate in the technology industry. You can be on the business side of things, similar to what Mutale just said. So it's not just, I'm really excited to see that so many people are not necessarily feeling like, oh my God, I have to learn, how to code. You can be a product manager, you can be, in finance, you know what I mean? So there's so many more opportunities. And I really think moving forward, it really is just amplifying that, amplifying the opportunities that do exist, that it's not such a big delta and it's not such, a heavy lift. You don't have to go and major in computer science. You can major in other things and still work and participate in, the technology economy.
Angela, as you were saying, what's interesting is that the tech world really is expanding. We may not be seeing it from day to day, but there really is growth, as you've noticed over the last 20 years. So what I was going to ask you to expand on is just the community that you've been able to find, especially now that you're based in Miami, that there are these hubs that are developing that maybe people don't think about when they're thinking about technology, because they may only be thinking about Silicon Valley.
Corona really shifted everyone's view of like what it means to work, where you work at. And so prior, technology was really, really associated with Silicon Valley. And, my previous business, that's why, the accelerator that I launched, which was the first accelerator globally for minorities, that's why it was based in Silicon Valley. It was important to be at the hub, the epicenter of, the industry. But because everyone is remote now, people are really realizing, hey, I can live where I want to live. And then if you follow kind of this conversation and discussion on Twitter of all platforms, a lot of folks really didn't like living in Silicon Valley. I did not like living there at all. As a Black woman, it was hard to get my hair done. I found like one person in San Jose, and I had to travel there every 2 weeks to get, my hair done. It was hard to find a beauty supply. I lived on the peninsula. I would have to go all the way to Oakland to like get a legit beauty supply. I'm not talking about Sally's, you know what I mean? So, a lot of people didn't really necessarily want to live there, but they did, for their career and for the opportunities that were there. And so now what we're seeing is with Corona, people are living where they want to live in Miami, Austin, in Texas. Those are a couple of the locations that people are really gravitating to. For me, it was interesting. I was in Miami. I had relocated to Miami, and then I had moved to LA for Streamlytics because we were focusing on media and entertainment at the time. And then when Corona hit, I was like, well, great. I can move back to Miami now. The proximity to Silicon Valley isn't as necessary anymore. And there's a great tech community here of folks who are really committed to participating in, I guess, building an ecosystem that is more representative of like what the world looks like. So Miami is a very international city. There's people from all walks of life here. In fact, even when I was running New Me, we were the first company to bring Silicon Valley programming to Miami. And one of the reasons why we did that and why I eventually relocated New Me to Miami is because the entrepreneurial ecosystem here. When we did an event here, it was a line out the door. All types of people just really hungry for the information and the access, that we had. And so Miami has inherently been entrepreneurial. And so what we'll see is other communities like Miami of people just wanting to live because, hey, I like this city. I like the community in this city. This city represents me and who I am and what I'm about. And Miami is just, one of those cities.
Mutale, I know that you are also thinking about relocating, as it turns out, to Miami. But you mentioned that you have a different view.
Yeah, I think that I largely agree with Angela that certainly in the last 20 years there's been an expansion, but I don't think that we should ever forget that the beginning of computing in this. The first person to actually program an IBM computer was Dorothy Vaughan, who we all saw in the movie Hidden Figures, which was in the 50s. So before we have what we know as computers now, there was a job called computer. That's what the job was called, and it was women, and it was Black women in the pre-war, the interwar eras that were doing those jobs. When those jobs became professionalized, because being a computer was like being an executive assistant, men start to take over the jobs. They start to push women out, specifically Black women. And we start to see in the 70s and 80s the industry that we have now. So we went from being overrepresented and really being the forebearers in that job. And the reason Dorothy Vaughan did it was her department was going to get phased out. So she trained a whole group of Black women to hand process these IBM computers. Then there was a change in demographics, and then it went to really the terrible points that we see now and is slowly coming up. But I don't want to just concentrate on numbers. I'm really interested in power shifts. And when we speak about Blackness, I think that we have to complicate that narrative slightly. There are many more proportionately Black Africans who are immigrants to this country, people like me, people like Timnit Gebru, who has been in the papers for being fired from Google's AI ethics lab, people like Joy Bulawami, Ghanaian computer scientist, just seen in the movie Code of Bias. And what that does is really disappear Black American people. So whenever I think about Black people in tech, I always want to be really clear, specifically because I spend so much time with companies, that your racism should not stop you from looking at the talent that you have outside of your door. You don't need to import us to be the Black talent in the same way you see HB visas with Indian and other Asian immigrant groups. But what we really need to do is go into places like Miami, Austin, places like Brooklyn, where I'm from, and you'll find the level of innovation there. And so many of those jobs are being self-taught. I've been on so many product teams where when we're given the assignment, none of us are specialists in building that product, but we learn, we iterate, we have supportive teams around us. And I think those pieces are what's really hidden. And to me, I will never be satisfied. I'm very plugged into the research community because I was interested in emergent tech. I was interested in AI years ago when nobody was thinking about that. I'm also interested in quantum computing, so that I am well networked there. Where I'm not so well networked, and what I really like about Miami, are the people like Angela, who we all look up to, the people like Felicia Hatcher, another powerhouse in the Miami region, who we all look up to. They were doing very different type of work. And so the communities didn't necessarily mix. And then the second thing I'll quickly say about Miami is, unlike New York, because I never moved to the Valley, I spent a lot of time there because of work. And I have to agree with Angela, it was a barren wasteland of white people. And I felt very lonely. But one of the things in New York, when we tried to do the same, we didn't have an enabling environment. What you have in Miami is a mayor that has said, this is going to be the next tech hub. They just nominated a VC in residence in the mayor's office. Now that I'm doing much more investing and I'm looking to support startups, I'm seeing angel networks like Black Angels Miami. We don't have Black Angels in New York. So it's just this great mix. And then you're right by the beach. I mean, to me, I'm just like, yeah, go Miami. Because you have the people, you have the politics. And then for markets in the diaspora, it's a great jumping point.
I would love if you would share some of the challenges that you've had to overcome, some of the hurdles that you've had to leap over in order to get to where you are now.
I was asked this question the other day, and I feel like I've had a lot of hurdles, in my life, being an early mom, a teenage mom, and then being a single mom and having 3 kids, and then doing really well in my career, and then being diagnosed with cancer and having to overcome that. So there's been, I think, a lot of hurdles. The hurdles that I think I've had more recently, and I don't know if this is because, like, this is my third company. I guess I'm not registering them, you know what I mean, as hurdles. And it's
Mhm.
almost like kind of a muscle, like you just it gets stronger and stronger, and they may be hurdles, but like they don't affect you the same way. And so, just like with any company, you're looking for funding, early on. My issue, with this company is, honestly, I had accomplished a lot already. A lot of folks that were in the community, the tech community, VCs, they had knew of me. I paved a way for many of them. But when I was working on Streamlytics early on, the hurdle that I had explaining what I was doing, and that it was really, I truly believe that it was a future forward technology. And the issue there wasn't really how I was explaining it. The issue really was the capital landscape, right? For VCs, and particularly for minority VCs. If you look at a lot of the funds, a lot of them are super, super early stage funds. There is a huge gap for a fund that is focused on second and third time founders. These are folks, you're taking different bets. There's different risks associated with it than a first time founder. And so the issue that I came across was, okay, this is what I'm working on. This is the valuation based on what we've developed already. I was able to sell New Me. And so I had capital to invest myself in the pre-seed of New Me. So I was able to really take a power position and say, okay, well, no, I'm not going to take this money. I'm going to invest my own money and then get traction that way. And so, that's really what I did for a while. But as we have more folks that, you know, start companies in technology, as we have more second and third time founders who may or may not have been successful, but have learnings from previous companies, that takes a new type of way to capitalize a business. And so, I think my biggest hurdle probably early on was that, but we've overcome that, and I feel like also my experience and being a cancer survivor also was hugely impactful for my career, because it put a lot of things into perspective for me. Prior to that, with New Me, everything was just really life or death. It was very heavy for me to help try to diversify an industry when no one else was really doing it, and kind of being in the belly of the beast in Silicon Valley. A lot of that weight, was really on my shoulders. And so now I have, I guess, a completely different perspective. And I feel like I understand my personal power a little bit more. And I also think that comes with age. I just turned 40 this year. So I think that has a lot to do with it as well.
Mutale, can you relate to some of what Angela's saying, especially in terms of just, the weight of being, sometimes the only.
Yeah, and this is really where Vanessa, I just fell in love with you as an editorial leader, and as a journalist, because you allow me to write about algorithms and statistics in a Black women's magazine, and you didn't think that it was a disservice to the reader. You felt that you had a sophisticated reader. And I would say my entry point, because I think getting a job at a tech firm is very different, in my opinion, than being in tech. And I will qualify that. I think when you have a job and you have benefits and you have a boss, you have a job. You could be working at the post office, you could be working somewhere else. But when you do what Angela's describing and you step out and you and technology are creating a new future, you are looked at differently. You are maybe not as friendly. As I said, I was one of those foreign-born Blacks who wasn't really making any waves, wasn't really being political. And when I realized that technical architecture itself could be racist. And this wasn't just my insight. I had been researching and then decided I was going to go into R&D. And what's really interesting about R&D in the tech world is that that's where the IP is born. So if you think about the value of a tech firm and what you're actually monetizing, you're monetizing that intellectual property. And guess what? There are no Black people in R&D. There are no Black people thinking about patents and licensing and in R&D labs. And I just found a lot of racism. I still face it now. I will publish peer-reviewed articles, and my work will be attacked. On the AI for the People side, that's a nonprofit, and the reason I wanted to start a nonprofit first was that I didn't have high net worth relationships. Even though I knew I was going to go over, I needed to meet people in private office, family offices. I needed to meet impact investors on the philanthropy side who are already investing in me and really like the work that we're doing on the comm side. And I really needed to understand high finance and high money. And when you're a nonprofit leader, as the leader of that group, you spend 75% or more of your time fundraising, capitalizing, and doing financial forecasts. And I knew that I really wanted those skills. So when it came to Farmer, Angela's completely correct. The median VC fund in this country is about a $17 million fund, which isn't really big. So they're giving out checks anywhere from 10,000 to 250,000. But what if you already got the 250? Because there are Black people that got it, and you actually need 10 million, right? Or you need 20 million, and the fund can't support you. What do you do then? And so I think for me, the way that I have kind of overcome anti-Black racism in giving me resources to either research or capital is lean very hard into Black communities, lean very hard into the growing Black angel and VC class, lean very hard into Black media, make sure that the content that we create is very much focused towards getting us in. We're just starting a disinformation project with Howard, for example, the Kathy Hughes School there, where Hannah Nicole Jones and Ta-Nehisi Coates are going to be that same school. We're going to be doing a project there. And what I found is that by creating that, I'm somewhat insulated, and then I can bring people along. But I mean, Angela is not wrong. The lift associated with it, as you can imagine, last year with George Floyd was the busiest year I've ever had. That was a very painful year. And then I would agree with her as well. I'm the mother of two, I was going to say little, no, they're teenagers, two boys. I get to co-parent, which is really helpful, but I'm not going to miss being the mother and being the mother of Black boys in America to go and do this tech thing.
I would love for each one of you to share and maybe a personal story about how technology has impacted on your lives in ways that were maybe unexpected, whether that's something professionally or something personally.
Even when I started to think about what I wanted to do next, after I sold New Me. And I was just kind of like experimenting with different stuff, producing different content. And that is what kind of took me down this rabbit hole of data privacy and data access and data portability. And so for me, that was super interesting to research. And then, as I started to talk to my kids, like we became more successful. My kids are like, wait, what are you doing again? It was interesting to hear that they already kind of knew about data, right? And so I think for, you know, everyone on this call, like we remember like before there were computers, right? And so like we had to grow up and learn it, you know what I mean? And I was having this conversation, you know, the other day. I feel like anytime I hear a throwback of a dial-up modem, it's like a dopamine release, you know what I mean? Because it's like it reminds me back to like good times when we used to access the internet through dial-up. But you know, my kids, they understand what data is. They understand that they are creating it. And so for me, that is a big change in terms of how I view what I'm working on. And then even more so how I view how it's going to impact, you know, younger generations, Gen Z and the next generation after that. It's, you know, they really are growing up with technology and they really do understand, you know, what's going on. I had a conversation, you know, with my daughter. I forget exactly what we were talking about. And then we were watching The Flash because she loves The Flash. And she leaned over and showed me on her Instagram. She was like, "Why? I just got an ad, and we were just talking about this like a few hours ago." And so they really understand the
Mm-hmm.
power of that they are creating, how it is being leveraged, and how it is being exploited. And so for me, that just takes the work I'm doing. It makes it a little bit more personal. It's not just about this large societal issue, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
this, you know, forthcoming societal issue. It's about my kids and it's about my grandkids, you know, who I have, you know, yet to meet.
So when you go into journalism, you don't go into journalism to get rich, right? You go into journalism because you truly believe in telling stories. Many Black journalists are interested about changing the narrative around Blackness. You may become an editorial leader and then, you know, get income that way, high income that way, but it's a pyramid. There's only going to be one editor in chief. There's only going to be one management team. And then you're somewhere near the bottom. And for me, it's actually been really recently where last year we're doing all of this work with AI for the people to really help people understand, how did the video go viral? Why did it go viral? What's this new world that we're going in? Whatever questions, how is technology racist? All these questions. And I was invited to actually do a keynote at the Aspen Digital Hub, like the Aspen Institute's digital thing. And it was one more Zoom on a summer full of Zooms, a year full of Zooms. I wasn't that excited. And I go and I deliver the keynote. So I'm supposed to be, you know, giving the knowledge. And they were presenting stuff to me. And this woman started to talk about SEC rules for accredited investors. And she says, you know, you have to have a $300,000 combined income. This is probably way too personal. Please don't at me if you're trying to date. But I was single. I was like, combined income, really don't at me. Don't DM me. Don't do anything. And then they said, you know, 200,000 for other income, $1 million in assets. And I was like, hold up. I could be an accredited investor. Like me, Miss Broke person, waiting the day before payday, not knowing if my Metro card was gonna. I had got so used to, and I'd done so much work at that point, not realizing that I had these new opportunities, and it really put me on this journey of, instead of critiquing technology or commentating on technology or even building technology for somebody else, what would it look like if I could create the ecosystem I wish that I had come into 10 years ago? The first 10 years of my career were in journalism, then I switched, right? But Angela's right. It's really, there are people who have been in tech 20 years at this point, and they are young and they are vital. And so I was like, well, what would have happened if that had existed 10 years ago, if that had existed 20 years ago? And so now I'm beginning to understand myself as a creator of ecosystems. I'm realizing that the blessings that have been given to me because of this career that I fell into by accident, child. When they said Twitter, I had no idea what those people were talking about. No idea. This path that I followed, because I couldn't stop following it, it was just curiosity. I love Octavia Butler. So I was always like, how did she dream about this world? What did she do? And then realizing that I had been walking that path to get to a point where my family and I are secure, but my grandchildren aren't, and my grandchildren's children aren't, and their children, and I have the opportunity to not just secure that, because it's really funny for me to say, but I'm not actually that attached to money. I think that it's a tool that can make your life better. And I believe that we should make other people's lives better with that tool. But as I detached from money, money found me and it became something. And I share that just because there's so many Black people who are poor and poor like I was poor. I'm like old dirty bastard. I keep my food stamp card in my wallet and I show those badass spoiled kids when they're asking me for stuff. My son recently asked me for a Tesla when he was 16. I was like, see this food stamp card? We ate well, my son. We ate from, I was like, that was the first time we went to Whole Foods, player. You're not getting a Tesla. But I come from that. And so being curious, understanding systems, and then now being a creator of alternative systems I wouldn't have been at that call on, the Aspen Institute have never called me for anything else. So tech is definitely, my calling card. And it amazes me. And the one thing I say is if somebody like me can do it, two little boys on food stamps, was happy that I had access to Google's Playroom because I couldn't get someone to sit my kids, but I could put them in, which were for grown adults, by the way, these rooms. They weren't for kids. They did see two little Black boys playing there, but they were for grown adults. Through to a situation where I can make those types of moves is still something that I can't believe.
That's really phenomenal. Thank you so much to both of you for sharing that. I know we're getting close to our time limit here, but I did want to give each one of you an opportunity to talk about what advice you would give to people who are interested in data mining, who are interested in AI, who are interested in pursuing some of the things that you've pursued throughout your careers and don't know where to start. What advice would you offer?
For me, the first piece of advice, I guess, is a little bit of homework. I think people are interested in things that are new and innovative, and artificial intelligence is like one of those things. But I don't think a lot of people really know what that means, to be honest. And so YouTube is your friend for sure. Just from an educational standpoint, I love YouTube and the creators' abilities to break down complex concepts into things that are digestible, and there are even more technical lectures on there as well. But the first thing that I actually would recommend folks to do is to actually request your data from Google, Amazon, and Apple, and really look at your data files. And it can be intimidating because, some of them are structured pretty easily, like it's a CSV, and it's really just kind of a spreadsheet that you're looking at your activity. But some of it is also structured, in JSON, and it can kind of look like code. But if you just sit and take a look at the information that is in there, I think it will really give perspective and make it very personal, the data that exists on you on all of these different platforms, and thereby the types of data that these AI and machine learning, algorithms are actually being trained on. And so I think a lot of people are not making that type of connection. And so if you're interested in kind of where the future is going, I would recommend just doing a data request. The great thing is, California Consumer Protection Act went into place. January 2020. And a lot of these major platforms really just made platform-wide changes. So you can go on and request your data. Just search how to get my Google data, how to get my Amazon data. I know at Streamlytics, we have videos on YouTube showing people how to actually get their data from many of these platforms. And sit down and take a look. It can be intimidating, especially from these large multi-service platforms like, an Apple or a Google or an Amazon, but just actually unzipping the file, looking at the file, looking at the information that these companies have on you after you've been, kind of using their services for years. I think it'll make it more personal, but then it'll also help you really understand where everything is going, because people are kind of disconnecting data from AI, and at the core of it, like, the AI is just code. It's not going to work if it's not trained on data. And so that's the piece that people are really missing. So that's my biggest takeaway for folks who are interested in this.
I would tell people, think about what brings you joy and think about what you love and keep doing that, right? If you're interested in tech. When I think back to 2008, I was telling stories about candidates with those tweets. Then as I went in-house, I was still telling folks about technology. My job title was tech evangelist, right? So it was still that storytelling. When I went to research, I was telling stories about Black people in technology. And even when I met Vanessa, I was telling her the story of not just the figures of Black women in tech, but what that actually meant for the products that we were designing. And then AI for the People still, our team just got nominated for an Emmy because we were able to tell a story about facial recognition that was through the lens of shareholder activism and how we can't have this technology in our society, but look at what these amazing people were doing, and that's being recognized. And then even with Farmer, instead of being like, in 9 years, the earth is going to explode, which we just heard from the UN. What we're saying is we can train a technology, to Angela's point, using data from Soil Insights to find a way to actually stop emitting so much nitrogen. We can do that through technology. And if I wasn't a storyteller, I would still need that. In my company, I need storytellers. I need business people. I need computer scientists. I need marketers. I need testers. We're so lucky. We've just onboarded our first 700 farmers onto the platform. We have a pipeline of 250,000 more. Why? Because we've told them the story of how they can farm in a way that is better for the earth, better for us as Black people, and ultimately going to be better for their products. None of these things would happen without narrative. So my advice would be, find out what you love, do that thing, and then apply it to tech. And the Black folks are on Twitter, we're everywhere, just reach out. And one thing I was joking with Angela that's really unique to the Miami tech scene is whenever you meet a leader from Miami, they're just like, oh yeah, when you come down, call me, which is really unique. So there are many, many kind and good people like that in this space.
Well, Angela, Mutale, I just want to thank you so much for your time today. This has been wonderful. I think it's inspiring for people who are interested in technology to see two vibrant Black women who are making things happen in this space. And I just want to say thank you and just keep doing what you're doing.